The audition for The Showgirl and the Sailor was being held near Central Station. As I walked past its green and gold sign, I took in every detail, knowing this was the day I'd remember for the rest of my life. A man in a pawn shop window was eyeing up my coat. I breathed in the smell of salt and vinegar as we passed the chippy. Even though it was a sunny day, I swore I could see steam coming out the station windows. It was less than a minute's walk to the address. I hadn't swatched a single lassie in her Sunday best and fumbled for the ad, scared we'd gone to the wrong place. But unless the Herald was having us on, we were exactly where we needed to be. Well, this is it, I said, as we stopped outside of the decrepit door on Jamaica Street, the beautiful Larder man. We looked down and made eye contact with a Jakey. I'm poor, but there for the grace of God go I. He'd a brown paper bag in one hand and a shoe that looked like it had been eaten by a dog in the other. He smiled what would have been a toothy grin, but he'd only one cackle between his gums.
Spanning 3 generations of a dysfunctional working-class Glasgow family domineered by Jeannie, the ultimate Catholic matriarch. Be Good to Your Mammy is a poignant, authentic and extremely entertaining read. The superb family drama works so well because it is written almost entirely in Scots. Emma Gray is an exciting new Scots voice and I can't wait for more from her.
Blood and Gold by Mara Menzies weaves both Scottish and Kenyan storytelling devices into this beautifully told tale of grief, belonging and acceptance. Mara is truly one of Scotland's great storytellers.
The day before they planned to take her to the place where the health workers could better manage her needs, Rahami felt the walls shift around her and heard the old familiar murmur of the Shadow Man. It was time to keep her story safe. She understood their power and how once released they could not be kept silent. The Shadow Man understood this power too, and suspecting Rahami was up to something he could not control, he watched, agitated. She could barely raise herself up into a sitting position, but she persisted. She reached for the little wooden box that sat waiting on the bedside cabinet. It was of a simple design, with a thin gold band running along the side. Some might have called it an insignificant box, but it was the only thing she had of her mother's, and it was one of her most loved possessions. She opened the lid and began to speak her words. The stories tumbled out between dry, cracked lips. They forced themselves through in rasping whispers. They begged to be released, kept alive until they were needed again. Tell me, release me, please, don't let me be forgotten, they beseeched. She poured them in. Myths, legends, histories, memories, ideas, languages, folktales, every last one. She unleashed them all, and when she could not tell any more, she closed the box and fell backwards onto the bed, wheezing, desperate for breath. A few moments later, Jeddah entered the room, followed by her father and auntie. Rahami gazed at her daughter, who approached cautiously, not wanting to disturb or cause her mother pain. Rahami beckoned her forward and then slowly gifted her the box. The girl took it. There will come a time when you will need this. Rahami's voice quivered as she spoke. She wanted to say more, but at that moment she saw death enter the room.
I loved the storytelling in the book, that the book is about storytelling so much, and it mixes different storytelling traditions in a way. Again, the way that the book represents multicultural identity in Scotland today was important, but also it does so in a way that takes the mythology from both cultures, which I think, and it's handled very well, and also the writing is just so beautiful and gorgeous.
It's just such a witty, angry, really essential book for this time, and it's also a really compelling character portrait of a woman who runs a matriarchal society on an island, and what happens when to her and to the island when she is taken away by the ocean that surrounds her. And it's also told very much by almost a Greek chorus. So there's lots of characters to keep track of, but it's really deftly woven, and in with that as well is woven the origin story of a mythological figure, and a much kind of broader outlook on identity, both like gender identity and national identity, and it does all this while being very funny.
Every morning, every evening, she stands on the cliff and looks down at the tide, how the sea rustles in and is sucked back out. Twice a month, when moon is at its thinnest and its fullest, its birth and its death, the bay below her cliff empties completely of water. And on those days, she walks right out in her long dress and leather boots to ease sea creatures from the sand. She calls herself Quen, and Quen is what the island will be called after she is gone, after her bones and her hair have been dispersed to the sea, and her thoughts to the winds, and the sea creatures whose relatives she ate are eating her. Quen, call the tides. Quen.
It was Geordie that those earlier folklorists had come to see. They were mostly young men with beards and dark-framed glasses, and they came with heavy reel-to-reel tape recorders, and later with smaller cassette machines, and they recorded him telling stories until he ran out. And then they would ask for more. He didn't like to disappoint them, so he would say he was tired and would have to have a think, and they were to come back in a month and be sure to bring another bottle of that fine whisky when they did. And by the time they returned, he would have another batch of stories for them. He was a rogue, Geordie. He would order books of folk tales from the library van and read up on the kind of things the students liked and change the names or add a new twist to a story that came from somewhere else. And they loved it.
Like the very best Harris Tweed, News of the Dead weaves three narratives together beautifully and envelops the reader in a satisfying warm glow. Accomplished Scots language storyteller James Robertson is the ultimate skillful weaver. Spanning three different eras, News of the Dead is a superb novel that exemplifies the very best of Scottish oral tradition and historical fiction. It's extremely skillfully written and deeply emotional, with an ending that reduced me to tears.
The Pharmacist by Rochelle Atella follows a pharmacist as she navigates her new life in a bunker. I'm not going to give too much away, but the book explores power dynamics, power imbalances, and human nature in general. It's actually scarily reflective of our contemporary society as we know it.
I shifted position. I could hear people breathing, quick and erratic, while a child cried out in the distance for her mother. I brought my hand up in front of my face, but I couldn't make it out. We'd been told this particular bunker housed 0.2% of the city's population, the country's best minds huddled together. But in reality, it was mostly populated by politicians and bankers, the odd media mogul thrown in for good measure. They had had enough money and influence to protect themselves and their loved ones, but there was nothing particularly special or impressive about any of them. Where were the experts in science and academia? Could I assume that they were safe in another of the city's bunkers? We were a poor mix of a gene pool too. My mum's North African heritage must have been missed on admission, pale enough for me to slip through the net when combined with the gift of a Western surname. When I was little, I used to force my parents to put their arms next to each other. The contrast in their complexions fascinated me. My brother and I, a perfect blend of them both.
Douglas Stuart has a real knack for creating characters that you love to love or love to hate, and of drawing the relationships between those characters in ways that drive the plot forward and are also kind of just really immersive. You really feel yourself in these tangled family dynamics. It's also a fantastic portrait of poverty and of sectarianism, and has a lot of sometimes shocking grittiness to it, but in a way that never feels sensationalist. It's always all about the heart of the story, which is young Mungo himself and this blossoming romance he has, which will kind of break your heart and make you laugh at the same time. And what more could you ask of from a novel?